All right, welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of the Untitled One Piece trading card game podcast. It's important to remember and understand here that we are, in fact, the only podcast about the One Piece card game. So keep that in mind in your listening habits. My name is Britt, otherwise known as Hazewise, is my Bandai ID, and I'm joined here today with my main testing partner, Rayshawn, RTY.
Yo, what's up, everybody? RTY here. Many of you guys know me on Twitter as RTY, so you can just call me RTY.
And so, before getting into our topics for the day, I think our main discussion is going to be going over the North American Bandai Card Fest results from last weekend, trying to get nitty gritty into the lists in terms of not just what decks were played, what decks we saw in the top 32, but also thinking about how they differed. You know, a lot of people, Doflamingo, obviously, I think most people expected it to be the most played deck, and it I think certainly was. It was the most represented deck in Top Cut. I wish I was trying to look compared to like bigger games like Pokemon. I couldn't quite find the analytics that they have in terms of just like what the overall numbers were. Like from Eggman, all I saw was top 32. But I would be curious to see other very good talking points in terms of like understanding and predicting meta games is not just what wins, what tops, but the conversion rates. How many people played the deck and how many people did well. I think a good example of that somewhat recently was over in EU, a format or two ago, the regionals where I think like the Italian group of players, they brought the mono black Luffy leader. And, we have interesting stories sort of how that deck developed and really never quite made a splash over here across the pond or what have you. But just in terms of it was a surprise deck, and almost everyone who played the deck did really, really, really well. So that's a number like only like 1% of the field played it, but like 90% of them made top 16 or better, or something to that effect. So those being able to recognize those sorts of results is like a quiet skill to have. Like sometimes you see this was something we would do in Pokemon, which I guess to say is I am historically a card game player. I come from Pokemon. I played a lot of Hearthstone. I even worked as a designer on Hearthstone for a little while and worked in a couple other card games since then. Played Lorcana for a little while, which I also really, really like. Risham actually is the real reason that happened, and I started playing card games again. But just don't have time. I wish I did. I wish I could be full-time like Impact, just playing card games all day. So I only play Piece for the moment, but I'm a big appreciator of Lorcana from the sidelines. But anyways, going back to the previous thoughts, a lot of the times I had several, I think, big success stories in Pokemon where just like one person, what may have not even been a very good list, but they topped, and it was just, hey, let's look at this a little bit closer. Maybe this person is onto something. And
Right.
so, unfortunately, in this current format, we don't have any of that to talk about, which we'll save for later, especially because I wanted to compare it to the 05 Bandai Card Fest, which was my first event, basically in the game outside of locals. But yeah, that was a long ramble. Rishon, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, talk about yourself a little bit and your history in the game?
Yeah, so like you said, well, originally I come from the fighting game community. It's really where I've kind of established myself prior to this. Spent like the last like almost 10 years of my life playing Street Fighter competitively. Got some decent results there. Top 96 at Evo Japan 1 year. Top like I think it was like 96 at CEO for Street Fighter 6 as well. So did pretty well there. And then when Lorcana came out, kind of found myself not wanting to play Street Fighter as much, and I dabbled into Pokemon a little bit on live, and then I hit up Britt one day. I was like, "Yo, do you know anything about this Lorcana game? Like, what is this game?" And he's like, "I don't know." So I bought Starter Decks. We started testing it, and then I just kind of fell in love with TCGs after that. And then naturally, I think you started playing the One Piece game a little bit more. And since you're like my main testing partner, I started gravitating towards it too, especially once the set 2 of Lorcana came out, and we've both kind of found ourselves just not enjoying the meta as much. And man, it's just been One Piece ever since for me, man. Like I fell in love with the game. I love the IP. I've read the manga, watched the anime. Yeah, it's been nothing but One Piece for me ever since we switched over to this game. And now I'm just full TCGs. Like I don't really play video games that much anymore. Whatever TCG's coming out, Project K, Gundam, etc. I'm always just super interested in now. So that's kind of where I am. That's my backgrounds, what I do now. Yeah, it's interesting working esports, but not really esports gaming anymore. I'm just trying to turn cardboard.
Yeah, and I guess kind of where our competitive story starts. We both basically kind of started learning the game kind of at the tail end of '04.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the weekend where we got those temporary bans on Red, on Whitebeard that didn't last for I forget how quickly they got undone, but it was
It
kind
was
of
like
like
a month.
too little, too late. Yeah,
Yeah.
too little, too late, and no one going into the OP05 that it just wasn't going to be as dominant. I think it stayed pretty good. Honestly, I think there was at least one in the top 32 of the '05 Bandai Card Fest, but I think for both of us, Sakazuki was the first deck we both really started playing, really like learned the game on. I
Yeah.
know we have we're in Kansas City and we're pretty close to Lawrence where KU is, and there's a pretty good player there named Dexter. He won the Peoria regionals in the '04 format.
Yeah.
And so he's a big reason why I learned the game. I grinded with him in '06 and '05, and it is One Piece is a hard game, and it's coming from someone who knows card games really, really well. And maybe it's just kind of this unintuitiveness in Bandai systems compared to, I mean, Pokemon is really its own game. I think I naturally found a home in Lorcana because it's so close to Hearthstone in a lot of ways in terms of kind of what the cards do. The combat obviously is the same. But yeah, just even I know even winning locals, I was still so bad for and still just slightly above average if I had to pin myself down.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of an interesting part as I was winning, but I was still just so fundamentally didn't understand the game on lots of levels. And this is something interesting too that's just happened to me a few times playing card games, but it was interesting that we dabbled in Fusion World as it was coming out. And I felt like after I spent time just kind of learning a similar but different system, stuff just started to click. Something about that game just made me understand my attacking, my swinging in a way that started feeling much more intuitive. I'm not quite sure exactly what I would pin down in the rule differences that would maybe be responsible. Maybe I would, if anything, it's just that everything has rush, so that you're fast and just attacking probably way more compared to One Piece.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a big just something clicked in dabbling in that. And I just when I was really young in high school still, I remember just kind of something similar happened. I learned Magic basically for the first time, kind of some basics of just card advantage. I come back to Pokemon and somehow I was able to apply a lot of those learnings there, and that was like the around when I qualified for the World Championships for the first time. But
Yeah.
I guess all that to say, yeah,
I think it's the same. I think it's the same here, right? Like Fusion World taught us that our swings had to be intentional because very rarely are your 15s at 15s ever going to get through. That's not the intentions of swinging the 15 out of the 15, right? It's just like to get the card out of hand, or if they're awakened, swinging the 20 at 20. It's just to get that card out of hand. So your swings had to be more intentional. And fundamentally, when you go back to One Piece after that, you understand in your terms what free fives are. Right, very rarely are you like swinging a 5 out of 5 to KO the character. If it happens, whatever. But you're swinging that 5 out of 5 to extract value from their hand, not on the board. And that's kind of where we've definitely, I think, once that clicked for us, the game started to click a little bit more.
Yeah, I remember coming back to like '05 testing and just like it sounds so silly and simple, but I just like okay, I was swinging 6K with Sakazuki, and I'm like okay, this means 2K, right? Like I just
Yeah,
what a basic thought, what a just beginner level thing. But I remember just I get it now,
yeah,
at least on some level. And I think just advice I know I've given Rayshawn as a newer player before is just like just play card games. It doesn't matter which ones. Like even if they're drastically different, you're just kind of putting yourself in the space to solve these logic puzzles. That's all these games are kind of at the end of the day. And so there's just I think just being in that space helps. And I played chess at a very young age, so I think I've always just been kind of had a knack for strategy.
yeah.
But I think that's a pretty good. It's not about us. We're here to talk about the card games. So I think it's a nice intro into our first episode today. But Rishon, do you want to get us started? Where do you want to start in terms of the '09 format, BCF?
Yeah.
Where do you think's best?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just kind of like start with. I mean, probably BCF. Let's start with BCF. It's fresh. It's new. It just happened, and then we can kind of take that and transition into the format overall, and what that's looking like. So BCF, we cross AI, closed it out. It was Black Yellow Luffy, but Black Yellow wasn't the favorite in that event, which sounds unusual.
That's what I was about to ask. That I know, especially too, you have been, you've got the receipts, so to speak. You were predicting BY was going to win the event at least a week or two ahead, and I know, a lot of top players landed on it. Jackson, I believe. Gosh, I'm blanking. Chris Sock.
Yeah.
Cross, obviously, and I think for some reason I think we do this too often in analyzing Eastern Japanese results. This is something I definitely feel like I noticed in Pokemon, where regardless of like how strong they really like to play new cards more so than they like to play the old ones. And so I think there was somewhat of a general impression about BY as being pushed out of the format, and I would say that would be a twofold concern. It was one, the existence of Gold Roger. I think people see that card, they read that card. I mean, I could probably similarly find receipts of people saying this, and it's just we're declaring the death of the deck like on the spot.
Yeah.
Oh, Black Yellow can't function in a world where this card says I win the game when you're at 0. And I think even going back to that, like I would say I was guilty of that thought, and I think like I very loosely was like, yeah, that seems true, and moved on. But of course, I think maybe the real thought there is that BY doesn't really live at 0. You're looping at 1. You're looping at 1, and so Roger just never ends up being a concern, even if like on paper you think this card wins the game. You've got Sabo blockers. It's always what you're trying to do. Oh gosh, what am I going to do? And it just turns out to be totally irrelevant. And I'm just being a student of these card games. I can also think of several different stories where hard counters get printed and it just actually did nothing to the deck it was supposed to completely destroy.
We saw it in Pokemon, right, with Mew. Like they printed so many counters for Mew, and Mew just survived for forever.
Mew VMAX is probably my least favorite deck for anyone who know that game. But there's the Drapion, there was a Mightyena, and maybe one other card, and it still wins Worlds. But anyways, and so outside of the red Gold Roger, Blackbeard, I think was the other bigger concern about Black Yellow Luffy's just existence in the metagame. And I'm trying to think a little bit, even going back to the end of 8.5. My memory is just a little foggy. I remember Jackson winning an online with Dofi, but I'm blanking a little bit on maybe you can help me remember. Did BY see much success at the tail end of the 08 format?
Yeah, I think it won a tournament. I can't remember. I remember Bonnie winning one. I think BY might have won one.
Bonnie won Madison.
Yeah,
and there was a Quan, right? Quan beat Impact in the finals, I believe.
Yeah. So part of my reasoning for saying that why I picked BY to win so early is, like you said, I think a lot of people tend to put the weight on the Eastern meta, but when you factor in that the West, we've always played more Lucci than the East. We've always played more Black than the East. That BY just made sense. And from my perspective, I thought Black was a really good bring to Nats. A, people weren't expecting it as much. B, I mean, you would think that BY would fall down a little bit more. And Lucci just has a really good matchup into most things. Like can beat Plouffe, has a 50-50 against Dofi. I mean, really doesn't struggle against Blackbeard at all either. So Lucci just made sense, which in my mind was like, okay, well, if I'm a player, I'm bringing BY because I think one thing that has been disproven, when we got the 8.5 meta is Asia was telling us that matchup was so free for Dofi. They were like, that matchup is free. That matchup kills BY. BY is not a real deck. And then we instantly just proved that that was wrong. That was just in our format, we solved the matchup and BY never really went anywhere. So I was like, okay, you have a 50-50 at worst, if not a favorable matchup into Dofi. All you have to do is dodge the Blackbeard, and even then, that matchup, while very, very, very hard to win, is winnable. So I just figured, unlike Dofi, there wouldn't be a lot in the top cut, but if 2 snuck in, the chances of it winning were extremely high. And that's exactly what happened. I think like 2 snuck in, and then Cross made it through against the Blackbeard, and then his path to victory was just Lucci, and like you can't ask for anything better as a BY player.
I think he actually has a similar story too. In one of the regionals he won was Zoro. I believe he was like the only Zoro uncut, and he got to farm Whitebeard all
Yeah,
day. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, see, for me personally, I was just like one step back. Basically, I was being pretty vocal that I thought Black Navy would win. I don't really have strong thoughts between on a real power. Like I definitely think Lucci is a better deck compared to Smoker, but Smoker has like maybe an advantage in consistency, and
yeah,
that's always a big deal in these larger tournaments. But that's where my head was at. It was pretty obvious that nothing could change the writing on the wall in that Dofi was going to be the most played deck,
yeah,
no matter what. I was talking to at the last like local I was talking about. Someone was just kind of asking like why it got so better, with the starter cards and things like that. And I was just like trying to, chewing on my thoughts about it, and it's like this happy little accident, I think, because like blue's identity as a color, it doesn't really revolve around what Dofi does. Dofi is like an aggressive deck, mid-range ish, aggro ish. I'm not quite sure where to really label it between those two. But yeah, you're spamming your leader ability every turn, just 4 4 4 4, as Noel would say. Um, and so you get that, and you have Jimbei, which is just an insane tempo. The double Jimbei games are hard for any deck to beat, even ones with a crazy advantage. Even the fringy yellow stuff, say maybe like Enel and things like that can give Dofi trouble. So you've got that. You've got in a vacuum the best fours in the game, at least relatively speaking. You have a Searcher, and Sengoku, but then you also get the cards that what is so typical in Blue's identity across card games, and that's the removal, or at least here the bottom deck removal, in Gravity Blade and Red Rock. So you've just got this like perfect hybrid of a good early game and then the best removal in the game too. So it's got the tempo, it's got the best tempo of any deck in the game, and then just like when you need to close out a game against that a big card like 10 cost Blackbeard, you Red Rocket against Bonnie or something like that. Gravity Blade goes pretty far. But yeah, I thought that that was where my head was at, and then but naturally, like if that's true, like Rayshawn says, all it really takes is that one BY to make it in cut and not getting unlucky, and it would be a sort of a field day for them. But yeah, I would say maybe a little bit disappointing for me, I think, on some levels, but with the exception of BY, I think, as we said, being a bit of a surprise. It's pretty standard results,
yeah.
I would say. At least the only other real, perhaps, difference I would note against like where I think the community, say impressions or prediction was at, is that I was surprised that Blackbeard did as well as it did. Like
Mhm.
it's a very good deck if you get the right matchups. I don't think anyone is ever denying that. But just in the way that we in the West differ compared to the Eastern meta game, we were much bigger on Floofy and Blue, I think, in comparison, and that's its worst matchup. I'm not sure, contrastingly, like what decks would really be popular. Um, like what decks the Blackbeards that won their bigger events were kind of preying on. Maybe things like BY, maybe Lucci.
Yeah,
Um,
I think a
but
lot
yeah,
of red.
yeah, I'm not sure. I would need to dig in terms of. I think there was one or two Blackbeard in 32, one in 16, I think. But yeah, I'd just be curious to find their Twitter and just see the matchups that they got, see if they beat Dofi ever. As that was,
No,
I
I
mean,
think
I
I think
thought,
the one who got top 16, the one that Cross beat, he only played 2 Dofi, and one was Jonas, and then one was actually one of our locals, Muddy Buddy. He played him round
really,
9. Yeah, and he
yeah,
lost to both of them, so he went X2 in Swiss, but was able to dodge Dofi for the rest of the rounds. So, and realistically, honestly, in our format, I really truly think that that's probably like the only way that Teach can show out in top cut, unless he lucks out against one of those Dofis and they whiff like a 1-drop or something like that. But even then, it's
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It's such a good deck. I started testing it pretty early because I was intrigued by these Garbodor, for example, is something pretty close to what it does, and that card has just always been busted every time it's printed in Pokemon.
Yeah.
And I really thought of it. I would play the deck, but the Dofi matchup just only got harder and harder basically over time, and it just feels like there's nothing you can do if I'm being completely honest. Like even I think the one local I played it at, I beat like a just beginner, not very good Dofi, and it was just like he would beat me if he knew what he was
Yeah.
doing. Like I would have lost so badly. And so yeah, I feel like you pray they miss the one top deck arrangement early, or you just see finger pistols in your life and claw on board somehow. I didn't actually look. Was there anything interesting? I haven't caught all the stream games yet. Was the Blackbeard in top 16 that crossbeat? Was it just standard, full, nothing but Blackbeard pirates? Did it play Jack? Did it play Kaido? Is it playing any of the Fringer
No,
cards that
the
are?
only really fringe thing about his list, if I remember correctly, was he was playing a lot of Tempest Kick. I think he was playing like three or four Tempest Kick, honestly, which was pretty interesting, I think. But I think that was like the only thing outstanding from his list. That's different from every other standard list.
I never got around to testing the Tempest Kick.
It seems good, right? Like a good trigger KO 3. You could do the reductions, making your dot cube stronger and help you keep your hand. Seems like pretty good in the deck. Like I understand why they're playing it for sure.
Yeah, but where my head would be at in that is that it doesn't help against Dofi, and
Yeah.
that's the only matchup you need to beat. And that's why I was big on Jack myself. I
Yeah.
felt like I felt like the only games I ever really had a chance against Doflamingo, saying when I wasn't seeing good triggers, was like curving into Jack, because it lets me I kill something on the turn that is played, and it's a AK that is probably going to just clear board or just keep using his ability one way or the other, and it's a big body to play on curve. So I was always pretty passionate, feeling like if you don't want to just go home against Dofi, needing something like that. But I guess also I didn't feel like solving the mirror. The mirror for Blackbeard was not particularly enjoyable, so I'm a Bonnie player. I'm a green player for the moment, so I'm just right back there.
That's just always been the one thing that's really kept me away from going back to black decks, is I just don't enjoy black mirrors. And that was a reason why. And Cross did a type up in his Discord about it, and he was really going to bring Lucci to Nats. And the one thing that made him change his mind is he said, I don't want to play the mirror. And then so when you ask Cross, you say, well, why? Well, what is it about the mirror you don't want to play? He said, you see Jack on 7, you win game. You don't see Jack on 7, like, you scoop. And he didn't want to play under those conditions, basically. And so that's why he ended up bringing BY, which is super interesting, thought process. But yeah, black mirrors are just terrible no matter what the leaders are at this point, and it definitely stays the same with Blackbeard, I think.
Yeah, I've basically never been a black player since Sakazuki, basically for the same reasons, as I've just really disliked playing the Moria mirrors, and I really think a lot about in terms of like when I have to lose to a deck, like also like what does it feel like to lose? Can I actually like play well and win, or do I truly have to get lucky? And so on top of the black mirrors not being great, I would hate to play a deck that loses as bad as black does to black yellow Luffy. Like I just
Yeah.
matchups that are basically impossible just are unfun to me. I would rather lose to Lucci like 7 times in a row on Bonnie, which is a particularly unenjoyable experience. But I still think that is better.
Man, dude, never forget that store regional. That one store regional where I should have been on Law the entire time, but Lucci had just came out. I was on Lucci since the beginning of the format. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna get my Nats invite, sit down round 1, play against BY, and it was over from there.
I played 3 or 4 BY.
Yeah, that story
at that tournament, so it was a good meta game for me.
But,
so moving on then we've talked about Dofi, we've talked about BY. I think we'll talk a little bit more particularly about lists in a second, but what are the other real sort of contenders? What other decks did we really see in the top 32 in terms of popular brings and just good decks in general?
Yeah, I think it's like actually kind of like, when you really think about it, disappointing. Because we have these new decks that are in the meta. You have Shanks, you got a lot of Blackbeard, like you got a lot of potential new things, but it doesn't really shift too much in the top 32. So you still see, and we all figured, like you said, it was going to be mainly Dofi in the top 32. But Dofi, BY, Lucci, and that's just kind of been the story for the last 3 formats. And staying true there. I think looking at this top 32 list here, a Bonnie snuck in, two Bonnie snuck into the top 32, and then like a Shanks, and then everything is Dofi, Teach, and Black Yellow. So
I mean, I feel like there's Ploofy, Shay, like there's all these like they're not like say A tier compared to S tier. Like let's say Dofi, BY, maybe S, and everything else A or B. And I just like all of the B decks basically are the A decks. They just lose to black so badly, and we just feel stuck in that kind of problem where black is just always such a powerful brand because it just not only it's not just like favorable, it's like strongly favored against all of these decks. Like there are lines for all of them to win, to be sure, but Shanks usually loses to black. Bonnie always loses to black.
Yeah.
Ploofy, I think, typically loses to black too. So those are the at least Shanks and the newer cards for Ploofy are in Blackbeard are kind of the biggest things, and just the way that the old decks function and exist. There's space for them, but just not enough. And I don't really know sort of like where you solve that or exactly where we'll go going forward. I'm a little save this too for later, but I'm definitely pessimistic about the future of the format. We have some fun OP11 cards to talk about later, but nothing seems like it can really challenge our big dogs right now. There needs to be some kind of bigger shakeup, or at least the EVO2 and OP10 just are kind of mid-level sets. Like I don't know, like 06 with Moria, 09 with all of these cards feel like really big and impactful sets. Still awkwardly not so much compared to Dofi and just these starter deck buffs that it has, but
yeah, I think we'll see most of our buffs out of the upcoming starter decks more than the sets that we'll see. Every card we've seen out of EBO2 so far, I'm just like, okay, besides the Searchers, and the Anel, there's been nothing crazy that I'm just like, okay, well, this doesn't help anybody. And then, the leaders we revealed, and like you said, we'll talk about those later today. I'm just like, man, I don't know. Those 3 leaders tell me that we got another format of Dofi BDIF to me. I don't know.
It's either that's true or it's just like it's similarly just a waiting game until one of the 6 starters is just comically overtuned.
Yeah.
What they'll be, I guess we'll see, but that seems right to me in terms of where it seems like the metagame is going. So now, just thinking about, so I guess we've kind of given a not so explicit tier list. And so thinking for the Mexico event this weekend, where do we want to group, all these decks we've talked about so far? I think, clearly, and just looking at the top 32 results, we can say that, BY, Dofi, and Lucci. Like, I think those are, maybe all S. Like, it's semantics to me. It doesn't super matter. But, like, are those other decks contenders? They can win.
Yeah.
But will they?
Yeah.
Do we think we'll see anything drastically different? I guess on kind of a side note, I do feel like, especially Bonnie in particular, I think I would have to really do some number crunching to make sure this is more than an anecdote. But I feel like it has a strong track record of succeeding in the Mexico events, the Latin America events.
Like they love their Bonnie in LATAM. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. To a much greater degree, and I don't, there's a lot of factors that could yield to that result. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a Bonnie player, and I just don't feel like I think Bonnie is great against Dofi. It's great against BY, but you just can't black.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this is the LATAM Nationals, but their format is different where it's not invite only. So you got a lot of the European guys coming over. You got a lot of the NA guys coming over. So it's really kind of open. I don't think so I called BY winning NA Nats. I'd be hesitant to do it again. purely because I think now that people understand that the deck isn't dead, list changing it, right? So this is on our agenda. We kind of glossed over it, but like Jonas, who got third place, wasn't running Jozu, right? And I think that is one of the most important cards for that matchup. And so now people are going to start bringing the Jozus back in, maybe go more Grab Blade heaviers from the Dofi side. You know, and Black understands now that they have to tech for BY again. Sure, it could be one of those situations where it's a hopeless tech and it just actually doesn't change your matchup at all. But yeah, I think like maybe if one, it could be a similar situation where if one sneaks in a top cut and, you know, the pairings are correct, then sure. But I really do think it's unlikely. And to your point, Bonnie stocks go up. If BY's back in the meta heavy, Bonnie stocks go back up. There's a really heavy chance that you see a lot of Bonnie in top cut again. And Bonnie doesn't struggle against Dofi as much as people think. Like, it's very winnable for her as well. So
I mean, not without the Jozu. Jozu was a very big card in that matchup too.
Yeah.
Like if my Cavendish sticks on 5, like just go home.
Yeah.
And that's your main play with Jozu for the most part.
So I think this match is like actually really hard to predict. I can't put. I would probably go back to saying it's probably Dofi favored. Ploofy, man, Ploofy's. It's hard for me to sleep on that deck. One of the only decks that actually has a favorable matchup into BY is Ploofy. Like that, it just swings so hard at you and ramps into their big bodies that it's so hard for BY to stabilize. So, you know, if in a world where a lot of people do bring BY to this event, Bonnie and Ploofy are just going to thrive as long as they dodge the plethora of Dofis that are going to be out there. But in a world where BYs die early or there's not that much, it's anybody's call. It's like any deck can win. And I think that goes to a testament to say that this format's actually really good. I think this is one of the better formats we've had since, I want to say OP05. Like OP05 was like the last real format I enjoyed, or really OP06, EB01, like that era. But like OP07, OP08 was rough. But with the introduction of Dofi and, you know, the support that Ploofy got, I think we're in a really good, stable format where there's so many decks that can win at any given day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. And just kind of where my thoughts were listening to that, thinking about like Holden, which they probably won't be there. Holden and like GTS, I think is their testing partners is very strong Black players, and I'm pretty sure they have a consistent track record beating BY with like Nightmare Luffy, like two Nightmare Luffy or Zombie Luffy, whatever you want to call it, in their lists. So I would think like that's probably part of the story of last weekend is that there were players, you know, that did play Black Navy, but maybe they weren't thinking so much about that matchup, and that they can make very, very, very subtle adjustments. Doesn't really change the numbers greatly. Like it's still going to be unfavored no matter what you do, but you have these smaller edge cases, and maybe they just don't see enough Sabo or something like that. You can get them down. I mean, we've seen, for as much as we talk about this matchup being, you know, almost deterministic, I see Lucci win plenty enough, or you know, could flip through any regional results, and there's probably some upset.
And those are matchups where maybe not Lucci, but Smoker thrives in. Like you give Smoker BY and you give Smoker Blackbeard, he's not as scared as Lucci is in those instances. Like those are very winnable matchups for Smoker. Especially, I would almost, after testing it a couple weeks ago, say that Smoker's favored in the Blackbeard more than anything, right? Because like all you got to do is just Tashigi, like Ice Age Tashigi the Burgess, and it's just like, all right, have fun getting back on board. Not at this point, right? But the problem with Smoker in these situations is you're just the worst Black deck in comparison to Lucci. Like you just can't outscale Lucci's Gecko Moria versus your Gecko Moria, so that matchup is very hard to win. But we've seen it in the East where it went undefeated in Swiss. So, you know, that's also just another deck you can't count out. I don't know how much people are banking on it, but we have been playing a decent amount here in the West as well.
I could also definitely see Blackbeard. Like I don't think Blackbeard will win, but I could see it having, you know, about a comparable showing, if not a slightly better one.
Yeah.
Just kind of where it sounds like we're, for the most part, other than Dofi still being huge, it sounds like we're just thinking in terms of BY and Black. After that, in terms of what people were bringing, we're talking about Bonnie, but if there's a healthy size of Black, it will be very hard. But like there'll always be one in cut. It's a very comparable and competent and capable deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like if that's the meta game. Like I think Blackbeard will always also stay pretty low of a bring. It's just not. But I mean, I didn't know the EU players were playing. You know, we mentioned them being playing secret decks, working on concepts. I could definitely see it. I don't know what it could be, but I could definitely see them having a deck in the same way that they had the ST14 Luffy.
Yeah.
Just a few formats ago. And I guess that's a nice transition too to maybe being a little disappointed on some levels. There's the results. Like thinking back of the '05 Bandai Card Fest. We knew Sakazuki, Enel, and Pluffy there were going to be the biggest decks. Of course, we saw Enel versus Sokka in the finals between Jonas and Jackson. But there's interesting decks. There was
there's a Zoro in the top 8.
There was Zoro, there was RP Luffy, and we didn't get any about this tournament. I was really hoping at least one or two, and the only one we saw, which we also knew would exist on some levels, wasn't a particular surprise, but there was an X2 Bello Betty that did not make cut. And I can't. I mean, I can't imagine Bello Betty will see more player do any better this coming weekend either.
Yeah.
But I think. I don't like. I think maybe an RP deck might be okay.
I think RP is good, man. I think ramping to 10 costs and throwing down the Shanks against most decks is terrifying. It's like almost like when you think about it, and I think Eggman said it this way, and I think it's the best way to put it. You're a 6K leader, you ramp to Shanks, and you're like, I'm a 7K leader now. Like, good luck swinging at me now. And if you have no way to remove this, and I slam down the second 10 cost Shanks, you might as well just scoop at this point. Like, I don't know how you win. So yeah, I definitely could see RP sleeping in. I think Bello Betty, not surprised to see one do X2, and I do think while it won't ever win, it's just kind of impossible. I think if it dodges Dofi enough, it can always perform. Its worst matchups are Dofi and Enel, and I don't think Enel is much of a real deck as people want to believe it is. And trust me, I want to believe Enel is a real deck. I really do. But the problem is, and Holden said this, and every Lucci player I talk to says this, and I truly believe it this way. They're like, Lucci versus Enel is a 90-10 in Enel's favor. And it does feel like that most of the time. So sure, while Enel can gatekeep Dofi, the Bonnie matchup is abysmal. The BY matchup is, while you're favored, it's only ever so slightly. So I don't really think it's much of a real deck. I wouldn't bet my Nats on it right now. Maybe once EBO2 comes out, but yeah, as long as Bello Betty can dodge Dofi long enough, I think she can get good results. Like, she can beat most every deck in the format right now.
I think Zoro. I mean, we have a Zoro local. He's a good player. He only plays Zoro, so we always deal with it in our metagame independently of anything else that's going on in the world. And it's a deck that I think perhaps could succeed, at least on this kind of off the radar deck. Like I can't imagine it's very good. It's probably terrible against Doflamingo. Just the bounce.
He doesn't think so. Our guy doesn't. Our local doesn't believe so. He thinks like with the right draws, if you just go wide so fast, like almost faster than they can, that you can. But yeah, all it takes is that one law for them, and the game is just kind of over for Zoro. But yeah.
Yeah, I could absolutely see games where you don't have law and they go chopper. It's something like they just immediately have 4 on board or something. I can easily see those games being difficult. But outside of that matchup, I think that Zoro it's really good against Bonnie, which is I think maybe something that people don't know. Like then just it used to be a good matchup for us, but just in the way our list has had to change over the formats, we don't have an early game at all anymore, which I kind of hate. But yeah, I lose to him all the time on green, and I just pass till 8, and he's got like 6 things on board, then plays Dragon, and I just can't catch back up and get John Bait or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely good against Blackbeard. I think it's fine against. I think it's probably good against BY still. Like I think. I mean, maybe you can't really beat the loop in the same way that Dofi really struggles when you just keep yourself at 1 life and having the blockers up. Since You're looking similar to Dofi is always looking to finish out with Perfume, just same card for Zoro and Jambe. That play doesn't exist unless they're at 0. But yeah, it would be. I mean, I definitely am not putting my money on Zoro doing well, but I think it's a competent deck. And in this, when we're talking about the fringe tier here, I don't know very much else that exists currently in this tier. So it's just a very slight possibility, perhaps. And Zoro is such a popular character. I think people stay playing it as our friend Long does too.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really think of any other big fringe decks right now. I mean, Bella, now.
I mean, Cross was talking about Corona at one point. I definitely didn't believe in that, but even just thinking off the cuff here, what's your motto? What's your motto like?
Man, she was a good bring at the end of 8.5, or was it 8.5? No, it was at the end of 8 before 8.5. She was a good bring. You beat Lucci, you can beat BY, but then the second Dofi came in, it was just over for Yamato. You're just like, oh.
Hey, I was just about to say there's no way you can beat Dofi, but other matchups seem good right now for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's just, I mean, that's what you get. This is your privilege as the BDIF. There's just nothing that beats Dofi. It's like we were talking about at the start of the podcast. It just does it all,
yeah.
and that's why that's just it. In simplest, rawest terms, that's why it's such a good deck. Yeah. Even in a world where, which is definitely something my perception has changed on over the week. I thought I hadn't done any testing and was just proven wrong very strongly in the testing that I did this last week. But I thought Dofi was pretty good in a BY myself. I remember testing it with Dexter in 07 and winning pretty consistently. And I was really I tested with Rayshawn this week and kind of just got dumpstered on every game we played. And I was really trying to pin down what changed, and I don't have a great answer. But in the older Dofi list, pre-starter decks, I'm pretty sure I was playing 4 Grav Blade, 3, the Wimmy list, 4 Grav Blade, 4 Kaido, and I think he played Boa too. And that's what I was talking about in the matchup, especially too because I was just testing Jonas's list without the Jozu. I felt like I needed that mid game character on board, in Jozu, just something that's a little bigger than my 4 cost guys, 7 or 8, and Boa being an 8 was a decent card.
Yeah. I think what changes that matchup a lot is how, and I don't know who discovered this, but the Ivankovs really changed that matchup for BY. The Ivankovs allow us to awaken early while going to a little bit lower in hand, right? We've always been playing the babies earlier, but when you're playing Ivankov, trashing a life, putting a card back into hand, we're always kind of staying at that 5 cost range, or 5 cards in hand range, which makes the pudding less threatening while also accelerating our game plan, which can make it really hard for Dofi. So your swings have to be super intentional in that matchup, I think, because the second, like you said, BY goes into 9k 1 life, you might as well, the game is just kind of over at that point for Dofi. So the Jozu definitely helps, especially because if we establish Punch Luffy on 5, you have to answer. I feel like you have to answer Punch Luffy. And if Punch Luffy just stays on board, the game just becomes so much harder for Dofi right now.
I think I don't know, Jozu maybe be a little too slow even. If I purely wanted to build a slightly new Dofi list to beat that matchup specifically, I think I would just play 4 Grab Blade. Yeah. I think I would do that before putting Jozu back in. Jozu's great, we've talked about for a variety of reasons here. But yeah, I think I would do that and just I would have a few more triggers against the mirror and things like that. So it wouldn't be terrible in a lot of matchups. And one perception that I feel I just hear consistently that people have been wrong about in terms of the Bonnie versus Dofi matchup is I always hear oh, just Red Rock the kid and you win. Which is definitely true in certain games, but as a Bonnie player, I've always felt like Gravity Blade is actually a better card against me because we're competing for tempo so much, and when you clear 2 of my guys, I better hope one of them is Hawkins who gets to stay on board or something, because I just don't really have time to play my 5s again when you've got things like Jinbei and just being cheaper in general. So I always felt more wrecked by it. It was a surprise. I went into the matchup too thinking that it was the Red Rocks I wanted to dodge for this, consistently playing against. But at locals, I would get grab bladed and even double grab bladed and just suddenly be in difficult spots in a game I was basically dominating up until that point.
Yeah.
But can't imagine anyone will do that because I don't think it's strong enough elsewhere. But if I had a target against BY. I think that's what I would do, and I'm sure there's probably some other decent ideas too. But I definitely I was impressed, at least in terms of just how wrong I was in the way I thought the matchup worked. It felt very hard.
Yeah.
Even like I don't think any of the games we played were, which I noted then. I don't think I had like the super nuts in any of the games we played. Like I never had a double Jimmy game or anything like that. So maybe those are qualitatively different. I would definitely be curious to, because I remember I think it was just a Discord screenshot, but Jackson said something to the effect of like, Jonas wins this matchup on just whichever deck he plays. I would like to hear him just sort of explain, oh, do this, oh, and if you're on the other side, just do that. Like I would be curious to hear that, because as I said earlier, testing his list, I just feel like I lost so badly.
Yeah.
When we played, and I'm not a Dofi player, so there's plenty of little things I'm sure I was doing wrong, but it just I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Every game was like over pretty quickly. It felt like.
The one thing he did say, Jonas said, was if BY were to become more represented in the meta, he would throw the Josu's back in instantly. He said he doesn't feel like you need Josu for the mirror, which I agree with. I think Josu helps the mirror, but Jonas is such a good player that he doesn't need that little bit of help that Josu brings, that he can win without it, and he would prefer the consistency of his deck versus adding 3 or 4 more bricks.
Yeah, it can be a little slow for sure, just in any matchup, but definitely the mirror. I feel like it can be like when I heard people weren't playing Josu, like I wasn't particularly surprised. And sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No,
Let's see if it'll come back to me.
Not surprised by people playing Josu. I mean, it's not one that like I said, it's just not a necessity. It's one that helps the matchup, but it's not a need. And
okay, I remember.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's good, but it can be just a win more card in the mirror. Like you lob them and then you do it again and then you're just uber ahead. I've won enough of the mirrors. Like I started considering switching off Bonnie at the last second and basically spent the last 2 weeks more so playing it than any green decks, and I also wasted a lot of time testing format too. But and I've played enough of the mirrors where I just felt like I was confused at how I won so badly, beat my opponents as badly as I did, because I felt like they were seeing the better cards and I was just doing these like incremental value plays that they weren't. They were bouncing their Coronas for top deck arrangement, and I was just like, Sengoku take a card, Sengoku take a card, and I just had card advantage, or and it had to counter when they did it, and little things like that. And so I played a game where I like got bounced into oblivion and didn't bounce them, and they played Jinbei first, and I just like still won somehow, and it was so confusing. But I think the game in general is about this for sure, but it's just these being very particular in your and how you use your resources and bouncing your cards to get value out of them. I think there's sometimes where a newer Dofi player might think that bouncing your 4 is like too slow. But say it's tapped and you don't have the the resources to defend it, and maybe it's just better to be in your hand to say maybe you're at risk of dying on going into something like that. And it's just these little edge cases where as newer players, it can sometimes feel like, damn it, you just happened to have the perfect counter, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I had the perfect counter because I made all of these just slightly difficult decisions throughout the game. Sometimes it can be luck, to be sure. Contrastingly, I'm sure we've all had the games where this is a 2K or I lose. Taking your last life or swinging your last character, what have you.
Yeah. The impact thought was if you can end your turn with your character standing, that is the best case scenario. And I don't think a lot of Dofi players are playing it that way. And a lot of people are counting not playing super Gecko heavy, so they're countering pretty heavy for their board. Whereas if you're playing a Gecko heavy build, you could easily just rebuild your board standing. And then not only do you have the card advantage, but you have the board advantage, late game as well, which is really strong. So definitely different approaches. And I think that was my favorite thing about Dofi when I was playing Dofi, is that I can just skill diff most mirrors, most matchups. It's just super fun about that deck. And that was one of the things I enjoyed about OP11 Sakazuki, was like you could just skill diff the mirror. It felt so good. and it's hard in most mirrors to feel that justification now. But that kind of like leads into the transition of, something else we have on this agenda, which is the postmortem of the bans. The current state of the format. Do we miss Sakazuki? Do we miss RP Law? Is there anything joining Sakazuki, joining RP Law soon?
Yeah, I think a good thoughts there. I think just thinking for fun here, if springboarding off some other conversations, thinking about whether or not there'll end up being any bans going into the Worlds format. But coming back to the initial thought, I think that we're definitely lucky. Like, it's kind of like a Final Destination experience that we didn't have to experience the Black Maria Law meta. Maybe it ended up being okay when Dofi finally showed up on the starter deck cards, but I'm very happy to have not had to play that format at all. But Sakazuki, I felt, and I think people have felt similarly. I think probably could be a fine deck. Like I don't know.
It's a tough call. Hilariously enough, we were playing last night in Discord, and we were playing some unlimited RP Law versus Sakazuki, and I was just watching two people play. Sakazuki was that card has to go. That leader, it was insane, just the plays he made, especially with the new tools that Black has gotten. Like, I watched this guy play Sengoku, drash 2 cards, and then draw 2 geckos. I was like,
yeah, I'm walking it back. Saka would maybe still be the more. Well, it couldn't beat Dofi, I suppose. So
no, I think it would beat Dofi easily, right? Because 4s were easy for Sok to deal with. If Dofi was spamming 5s.
Stage build.
Yeah, with stage, and then because you got to remember during our time, Brook didn't get. We didn't figure out about Brook until the end of the format, until Sakazuki was dead. But Brook stage is a disgusting combination, and Brook stage leader effect just kills. Basically kills everything. So, I think Sakazuki more so than RP Law. Though I probably miss Sok more, to be honest with you. But Sokka's just a disgusting deck the second that Gecko Moria got involved. Whereas I feel like RP Law, if they just said you can't play Black Maria, would still be a good deck, but I never felt it was the best deck in format. I always felt like I could beat every deck, but then I just lose to every deck. Like, Sakazuki was an uphill climb. And then my worst matchup was Gecko Moria. So I felt bad. And I think, unfortunately for us, it fell symptom to we put too much weight on the Eastern meta, right? The East loves playing the new cards, like you said. Like, it's hard. Just they're going to all gravitate to RP Law. Whereas the West, where we were super Lucci heavy, and that matchup was hard for RP Law. So maybe we wouldn't have seen the same results. And we'll never know. But I feel like the RP Law was a little bit ban for us was a little too fast, whereas the Sakazuki one probably wasn't fast enough.
I mean, I'd have to go back again too, but I'm pretty sure Law's like representation in Top Cut and how many events it won was quite a bit higher, even than Sakazuki at its prime.
Yeah, I mean the high roll was so insane with that deck. Like, it was primed to win everything, but Sok's consistency is just too good.
Yeah, so what about, let's try to close out thoughts on the current format. So two things. One, we need to predict what do we think is going to win this weekend, and then 2, like, say Dofi wins or BY wins again. What kind of bans would we be thinking about or considering? Say we're Bandai executives now, and we're going to make this call about the Worlds format. Where do you think your head would be at? So 2 questions.
Cool. Winning. And it, like I said earlier, it's kind of it's everybody's playground right now. It's hard to pick. I think obviously one thing that'll never change is Dofi's going to be the most represented, so he has the highest chance. I think if we have another instance where BY sneaks through in the Top Cut, it's hard for me to say no BY again. But I do feel like now that we've seen it sneak in, people are going to plan accordingly for it. So I want to say probably Dofi wins this weekend. Wouldn't be surprised if Lucci won. I'm just the natural thing where if BY falls down, it's probably going to be a Dofi Lucci final or a Lucci mirror. Please don't let that happen, but likely. So I want to say Dofi favored, but wouldn't be surprised if Lucci won. As for bans, I don't think we can move anything yet because, uh, man, the game is scaling weird with these new reveals that we're seeing in OP11, and maybe Dofi gets pushed out by something. And I don't want to preemptively ban it because I do think the deck is like fair enough that if it lives through OP11, just best deck in format, then maybe we do something then. But I think we let it rock for a little bit.
Okay, what about this then? I'm the president of Bandai now, and I'm telling you I've had enough of this Doflamingo deck. I'm making you in charge of nerfing. What
Law.
do? You get one card. You hit law.
I hit law. I think it was just interesting because I think everybody's gut reaction is Jinbei, but and I do think that Jinbei is a dumb card and blue doesn't need that card, but I think law is what breaks a lot of the matchups and what keeps the card advantage and the Dofi engine so strong is law. So I think I would hit law before I hit Jinbei, if not both. But definitely law is what I would target first.
I would think, especially someone with some experience on balanced teams and making these kinds of decisions, even like this, I'm sure most of you have heard of it, being card game players, but what you're always hearing on social media or whatever when the people have to defend their decisions and so on is like, I think in terms of like valves and levers and things like that, and like what does the deck look like if you hit this card? What would that space mean for the deck? What becomes the natural exclusion or inclusion if you get rid of Jinbei? But kind of not quite that thought, but at least attempting to be an adjacent one is I think that like law is so facilitated by it being with Jinbei that I think you would have to hit Jinbei, and especially compared to Boa. Boa is like a good but fair card.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anyone would really disagree with that. No one's slamming the table complaining why did they give the deck this card. It's great to be sure, but it's not breaking anything. But yeah, I agree it would definitely be those two, but
I think it has to be the law, right? Because I think I disagree with you in the sense that law strength isn't with Jinbei. Law strength is with the one drops. I think because one approach from the Shanks matchup point of view is that we're not running Red Hawk to kill the Dofi or to kill a character. That would be nice if we can kill the Jinbei, but like that's easily play around. We want to play Red Hawk to kill your Teach, to kill your Perona early, because that makes your law value so much weaker. If you're playing law, you're bouncing back the Jinbei or you're bouncing back the law, which is one body versus two. So like that's my instinct of saying like it's the law because that's what keeps the engine running and running and running. We, as a Dofi deck, as somebody who's played Dofi, like there's those games where you just open a Perona in your hand and then you never see another one. But law fixes that for you, and that's what makes the deck so consistent. So that's why my gut reaction was law. But like I said, I can also see a world where Jinbei is the one that goes. All that to say that Bandai doesn't ban SRs, so.
It's a hard. You've swayed me at least a little bit. Like I still think like everything is so facilitated by the Jinbei, and that it becomes such a snowball. Whether it's Jinbei, but like even Jinbei and Law picking up one of your cards or bouncing one of theirs has such crazy tempo. And I just trying to think about the world where the deck doesn't have Jinbei, but it still has Law, and it would be good, but I don't think it would be even remotely as competitive.
Yeah, not as explosive or fast.
Without Jinbei.
Yeah.
But I guess even chewing on that a little bit further, we obviously existed in a format with Dofi and Jinbei, but not the starter cards, and the deck wasn't all that good.
Yeah.
So more to your argument for sure. I'm not quite where I'm landing in the moment, but it's a hard call for sure. But I think in general, I don't really feel like anything needs to be hit. Like even in a world where like Dofi like wins all of these tournaments, it's checked. So there are decks that beat it. There are decks that can be competitive against it. I don't feel like it's comparable at any levels to the deck we've banned so far. And so yeah, I'd be pretty adamant that they won't do anything, but I don't know. Black Yellow Luffy is a deck that worries me in terms of just the future. I think it's quietly polarizing. Like it doesn't necessarily feel as like bad to lose against as like just watching your cards die and not doing anything like it typically does in against black. And there's just a lot of decks that just truly don't have, and I've felt this way for the entirety of its existence, even before like '07 when it really wasn't all that good. But even then, there's just like a certain class of decks that just genuinely don't have the firepower, what have you, to beat the combo, to beat just the raw power that all the starter deck cards have.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing you can do currently, other than a Moria leader lock, which I think is just far too late at this point to really matter.
Yep.
I wish they would have done it a while ago. I think that world would be an interesting one in terms of just thinking where the metagame went. Like in '06, I think Sakazuki still would have been great even without Moria, but maybe it couldn't have competed against the actual Moria deck. Hard to know. But at least in the current moment, I'm scared. I'm apprehensive about BY in the future. It's so unique. It's just such a unique deck in the way that it works, in the way that its cards interact with the board and itself, in the way you awaken and things like that. And there's nothing you could hit, other than the Moria without crippling it, because it's so reliant on these cards that only exist in its starter deck.
I think we're kind of seeing the RP law effect and it's kind of already happening where you have to be careful with what card you print for yellow or black. And we see it with the Zeus card, right? Like that card is so insane. That card just replaces Makino in the deck 10 times out of 10. You mean to tell me I get to do the same thing? I still get to trash my life, awaken faster, but I'm KOing a 5-drop for 2 Dawn? That's insane. I'm drawing a card, KOing a 5 cost, and awakening. That's insane. So you have to, and I'm sure they factored in BY a little bit, but they were also just being like, okay, what's the Otama for yellow? What's the most generic 2K that we can make besides Flampe? This is it. Oh, but then BY was like, oh, we're taking that 100%. I know that's not made for us. That's made for whatever's coming in OP11, but we're going to use that as well.
That's a good transition for our final topic here. We have just a few new OP11 cards to talk about. I think for next week's episode, we'll probably dig a little bit deeper into the OP10 metagame and just kind of what's been going on in the East as we wait for those cards, and we'll naturally have some results to crunch through. But why don't you take us through the handful of cards that got revealed earlier this morning, and I guess last night as well, in the case of the Zeus.
Yeah, so the first things first, super interesting, and an American leak. We saw the first OP11 leak in English, which was interesting. I don't know why that happened, but we see the Zeus, which is a yellow 2K with Nami on it. Super beautiful art, I think. That's, like I said, Trash a Life. No, it's not Trash. It's Take a Life. It's not even Trash a Life. It's Take a Life. So you draw the card, KO a 5 cost, 2 cost 2K. Super insane card just for yellow in general. Not even just BY. Just Anel is excited to see that card. I think Katakuri is excited to see that card. Not for its playability, because he's not one of the leaders that wants to take his life, but it's searchable. It's a Big Mom Pirates card. So he has a searchable 2K to add into the list now. Yeah, it's super good card. On top of that, we saw I think it's a SEC. We saw the manga for OP11, which is a 6 cost or 7. Another purple Luffy manga, 2 sets in a row.
It's the EBO2 manga, though, isn't it?
Is it EBO2? Yeah.
I think so.
And it's like Dawn.
Yeah, for the Grape Luffy.
Yeah, it's Dawn -2. The character gets rush under a condition. I can't remember off the top of my head. Dawn -2. It's crazy effect. Hold on, let me look it up because I'm forgetting what this card does.
Yeah, just pull up the game.
Yeah, let me just pull it up here. But this is a card that I thought was weaker. Then
I don't really pay attention to purple cards, but I don't have a good really any meaningful thoughts about what goes on in that color. But it seems alright. It's like a 5 cost 7 with rush potentially, so it's pretty it's statted strongly.
Yeah, it's a 6 cost 7K. Yeah, it gets rush, and I think you have to like you get to take a life effect as well, so you get to draw a card. It's okay. I think the common consensus on it is that it's one of the weaker cards that's been revealed so far. despite it being Gear 2 and everything and looking probably one of the coolest. But you know, the purple is just living their best life. They're getting all the support that they want. And then on top of that, we got 3 leaders revealed to us this morning, which caught me by surprise. I was not expecting it, and I don't know how you feel about them. I'm not in love with any of them, but we got a green Jinbei, a green yellow Shirahoshi leader, and a what is it? Oh, blue purple Luffy leader.
Purple Luffy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to be try to be very consistent about this in our Discord. Don't rush to conclusions until we see the whole set. But like off the cuff, the Jinbei and the Shirahoshi, that's just like there's gonna have to be some crazy busted merfolk or fishmen for them to be any good. And famous last words. We'll just wait and see. But I think the main card that everyone is talking about is the Blurple Luffy. So we've got another 6-cost, 3-life leader. But this is the first one that doesn't have access to red, which I don't know how meaningful that really is. Like, I think people naturally just 3-life, Rad Beam will always be great, therefore red. They kind of a loose thought like that. But yeah, why don't you walk us through what it does and all the combo potential people are really kind of hyping up about it already?
Yeah, so like you said, it's a 3-life 6K leader, and it says you may activate this effect at the start of your turn. So this is before your refresh phase. This is before you turn any card sideways, before you draw a card or anything like that. If you have 8 or more Dawn, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Reveal up to 1 Straw Hat card, type card, and add it to your hand. Then place the remaining cards at the bottom or top or bottom of your deck in any order. So what that means is when you have 8 Dawn or more, you get to, before you even draw for turn, you're drawing 2 cards per turn, you get to search top 5. You just get a free searcher built in with your leader. And it's not restricted to characters. It's not restricted by cost or event or anything like that. Just any Straw Hat card. So that means your removal cards, your events and stuff like that are all searchable as well. And then that also includes, and this is what everybody's hyping it up for, 9-cost Sanji. So 9-cost Sanji is searchable in that deck, and then you can stack your deck. So you can guarantee 9-cost Sanji hits. And so the combo people are excited for are 9-cost Sanji into 9-cost Big Mom. And then to take that combo even further, if you're stacking your deck correctly, you can even put that trigger, because you know what Big Mom's going to put in your life. You can put a trigger or event or something like that into your life as well. So you can stack your life, stack your deck, etc., and your draw for the turn after that as well. I think on paper, on theory, this leader strikes me similar to how Nico Robin does, right? Where you read this leader and you're like, this is busted. What the hell is Bandai doing? My concern is that I need to see the set before I'm like, this leader's busted. Because my thought is, I'm like, man, this is just a vanilla leader for 4 turns. Like,
yeah, I'm trying to think just loosely, like what kind of just awful decks have I seen hyped to hell, like when they're revealed. I remember people being like, "Bro, King is the most consistent deck in the game."
Yeah, like we saw Yamato and lost our mind. Yeah, we saw Yamato lost our mind. Double attack on a leader, banish on a leader. Like these kind of effects that are insane on paper don't always translate that way when it comes to executing. And without the set, it's hard to tell how strong this leader actually is. Right now, you're still stuck to the purple engine that Red Purple is playing. You're still stuck to Zero Juro and Bonclays. And we know that that's not always the best thing without the additional ramp that Red Purple has. So you can't even really guarantee your way of getting to 8 Dawn faster. So I think this is one of those leaders where we have to wait and see. I definitely see the potential and how strong this leader can be, but it's just one I can't get too excited for yet. I'm definitely not dropping $30 for a Sanji right now. I'm gonna wait for that to come down before I start coping that hard. But yeah, I see the potential. I think this could be strong. I think I've just been jaded by blue purple and every other card game too much for me to be excited about this, to be honest. Like in theory, blue purple is a ridiculous color combination, but if that was the case, like Croc would be the best deck in format. Like so we'll see about that one.
Yeah, the deck that I'm most inclined to compare it to is Marco.
Yeah.
Marco as a deck, its win con is similarly a Sanji combo a lot of the time, and similarly the way that not quite as as explicitly synergistic as the Luffy leader, but because you draw a card and leave it on top, you somewhat naturally are setting up Sanji as well, and that deck doesn't exist currently.
Yeah.
Maybe it does. Like maybe the '08 Frank and people like that who are playing it. Maybe it's still about the same, and it's just not a popular deck. I really have no idea. But just on paper, like having a nutty Sanji combo, unfortunately, doesn't mean you're a good deck. So we'll definitely have to wait and see. As well as like I'm also another thought I usually have when people jump the gun and thinking about these early reveals is that there may still be just much stronger combos
Yeah.
than the obvious ones. Like I would have to, like I said earlier, I don't know anything about purple, but yeah, I'd have to think longer. Like there's probably nothing. There's just what we've described here is a pretty insane play. I'd be pretty surprised if there does end up being something better than that. But yeah, we'll definitely just have to see, especially without any other cards revealed in the set. But it's an interesting start for sure.
I mean, personally, my mind gravitates. I think the 9 cost Luffy is better than the 9 mom. I mean, unless you're in a situation where you have to heal. I think, man, just being able to play Sanji into 9 cost Luffy, draw a card, swing 10, rush is way stronger than that. Like,
I never feel too sad to have 9 mom played against me. I'm just whatever.
yeah,
I'll deal with it.
yeah. The other
Right.
leader we got is Jinbei. He's a green leader. He's a fishman and straw hat crew, and he says at the end of your turn, if you have 6 or less cards in your hand, set up to one of your fishman or merfolk type characters, and up to 1 Dawn as active. You have more expertise on the green. You could probably talk about his effect a little bit more than me. My initial instinct is that this just isn't that strong, so I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, without cards, it's hard to say. But yeah, off the cuff, it doesn't seem good. But I would guess it has to. I would guess there's probably a 1 cost event for it. Like it'll have to have some synergy with having a Dawn active consistently, and we'll just have to see what that is. And basically thinking in terms of green purple Dofi, that's where it's like off white and spiderweb or something like that. So those the 2 cost events, since it's refreshing 2 at the end of turn. That's kind of what that deck is about. And so we'll just and Bonnie obviously it's built into the leader having the Dawn. So I would think that the synergy that it's expecting to have is going to have to revolve around that. Maybe things like similar to the other like green Doflamingo bars that just aren't popular, but they're similarly about restanding themselves, just as green stuff typically is.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see, but off the cuff, like it and Shirahoshi just seem unplayable to me. Like Shirahoshi, I'd probably bet pretty large amounts of money will be completely unplayable.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I was gonna say, and the Shirahoshi, just for those who don't know or hasn't seen it, it's a 5 life leader, which is interesting. Opposite of opposite of the Luffy, but it's a green yellow, can't attack. So that is what's making this a 5 life leader, is that it can't attack. You may rest one of your Dawn and flip the top card of your life face up. So similar to Pudding, to yellow purple Pudding. And then you may play up to 1 character card with the Sea King type, or 1 Majalo character card with a cost less than a cost less than a total Dawn on your board. That was a rough translation from Vampire, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think just like Vivi stays C or D tier, like in the fact that she draws a card, so that's always at least pretty good, even if she can't attack. But Rebecca is really the only can't attack leader that's ever been playable, and she's kind of similar to the Blurple Luffy that we've been talking about, and just plussing a card at the end of your turn was always very strong, and setting up your discard and stuff. But yeah, just have to have some crazy cards. But yeah, that's one. Even though I'm one note about waiting to see the whole set, this is one
Yeah.
we can just go ahead and put in the grave.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, I think that does it here for our first episode of the Untitled One Piece podcast. Remember again that we are the only podcast about the One Piece card game. I'm Brett Hazewell,
Yep.
and here with Ray Shaw. We'll see you next week.
Later all.